Christina, are you ready to begin?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Well, we start with our sitting meditation. Can you hear me? Okay. Would you like to give any instructions for the sitting meditation, Heather? Okay. Good evening, and it's so good to be with you all again. We have the opportunity once again to come together to meditate. And in our sitting meditation, find your comfortable place, relax your body. Pay attention to your breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Feel your body relax, your shoulders drop. Let us begin. We'll be talking tonight about right speech. I so thoroughly enjoyed delving deeper into this because I knew I had a problem with right speech. And it was interesting to learn that many Buddhist practitioners and even the leaders say that right speech is the most difficult for them. Why do you suppose this is so? Why is it so difficult to be honest and to speak in a way that is not hurtful, but helpful and compassionate with others? So we'll take a look at that. The Pali term for right speech is samavaka. Sama means in Pali perfection or completion, and vaka means word. And it's a lot more complicated than just keeping our mouths clean. So we know that there are 4 parts to the precept, and let's break them down a little bit. Abstinence from false speech is the first one. This is just telling the truth, just being as honest as possible with our feelings, honest with our views on things. It's better to be honest and offend someone than to be deceptive in an effort to make ourselves look good. The truth we're taught should never come before our own ego wanting approval or to appear more educated or intelligent or noble. It's said in the long training for enlightenment that a bodhisattva can break all of the moral precepts except this pledge to truth, because this is considered the most important. Truthful speech is parallel to wisdom. And being committed to speaking the truth is the same as recognizing what is real. You know that one of the basic tenets of Buddhism is to accept reality the way that it is. And when we tell the truth, it's giving voice to us standing solidly in reality. We're reporting as it is, we're reporting reality. So right speech is a devotion to truthful speech, and we're taking our stand in reality. The next one is abstinence from malicious speech. And this is speech that is intended to hurt someone. And we've all been there. We're all guilty. We're taught that it's wrong thinking to tear someone down or to shame them, or a group. And we see this done widely, particularly in politics. Slanderous speech is one of the most serious transgressions because the action usually occurs after deliberation. So it's premeditation, and that adds to the severity. Most of our reactions come from a place of our own interest in putting ourselves first. When we honk the horn at someone in traffic, isn't it because we think that we're we? our going is more important than where anybody else is going? We all want to get home, pick up the kids, or get to an appointment, or whatever it is. All of our destinations are important to us. When we tear someone down or shame them purposefully, it's like a form of character assassination. The Buddha would say that when we use such violent speech against another, we're allowing that violence into ourselves, and it builds up. And then that violence in us manifests to the world. We're taught that the antidote to malicious speech is friendship and harmony, to purpose to speak in friendship and harmony. The third one is abstinence from harsh speech, and this is spoken directly to another person. And some examples would be sarcasm, bullying, hypocrisy, criticism. It's degrading, and it is a form of bullying. And the Buddha says that the antidote for harsh speech is speech that promotes friendship and harmony. And the last one, number 4, I'm particularly interested in learning not to do this, is abstinence in idle chatter. Idle chatter is just frivolous speech and talking without any purpose. We hear it all around us. If we're on a bus or we're waiting in line at the movie theater, we're at the mall, sometimes in our own home, we're just filling up the silence. So what should we do? The precept is to talk about what's important and what really matters, but I don't think it's saying that we have to be very, very strict with ourselves. I think it's saying that the way we speak, we should try to have it connected to a higher purpose, a bigger picture. And the antidote to idle chatter is that we should make every effort to speak in words that have value and not waste other people's time. So that's the 4 precepts. And it's always nice when we're taught not to do something that we're also told what to do. And the Buddha offers this. He said, we must use loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and to relieve them of their suffering. Why is that so hard? Speech has always been very powerful, but the possible ways to hurt each other in this day and time seem blown up by 10 to the umpteenth power. The theologian Matthew Fox said that the Aramaic word for right speech is dabhar, D-A-B-H-A-R, which means word, but the literal translation of the word means something closer to creative divine energy. Imagine how our speech would change if we considered that what we're doing, what we should do, what we should strive to do better is to think of our speech as creative divine energy. Ty says that with our actions and our intent and our views, that we could sow seeds of mindfulness. That is creative divine energy, isn't it? Watering the seeds of mindfulness. The Aramaic faith claims that God spoke the world into being in that kind of poetic way by using the word debhar. So that just means that the literal translation of the word debhar, that reinforces the power of the word or phrase. We can't walk through the world voicing violence and participating in violence and then not be shocked ourselves when we see it in the world all around us. Even those with a good heart who never intended to hurt another person have toxic words escape from their lips. Our words can give somebody a complex or take away their reason for living or even drive them to suicide. They're that powerful and they can be that harmful. Ty tells us that if we cannot listen, we can never have right speech. Because no matter what we say, if we haven't listened, we're just going to be responding from our own position and not in response to the other person. And we're told in the Lotus Sutra to look with the eyes of compassion. We see that compassionate listening brings about healing. When someone listens to us that way, we feel like immediate relief. And we've all probably had this experience that when you talk to someone who is really invested in your feelings and wants to understand them, that we feel like they've heard us, that we feel like they see us. And when we feel that way, it's as if we feel we're invited to say whatever we want freely. It doesn't happen that much. Sometimes happens with really good friends, but we can set our intention to make it more by practicing deep listening. Deep listening is the foundation for right speech. It's like giving somebody a gift to really listen. And then when it's our turn, we receive a gift too. I have a friend, Steve. Steve and his wife bought an old house in a rundown neighborhood and turned it into a Catholic worker house. If you're not familiar with Catholic worker houses, it's just a house that's built on the intention to do what Jesus taught. And I'm not endorsing Jesus or any faith, but it's a place that people can use as an address to get their VA checks or military papers. It's a place you can go and get housing if there's room. You can go and get food, and they have services of faith 2 times a week. It's a place to have community, to feel like you're not invisible, and primarily homeless people and street people go there. But when I first started working with Steve on the streets, helping to feed homeless people, I experienced something brand new because Steve practiced right speech. And it was a little unsettling because this is not the rhythm of the conversation that we're used to. I would talk to Stephen and he would be looking intently right in my eyes. And when I said what I had to say, he'd just pause and take a nice breath and breathe out. And then he'd smile a little bit and say what he had to say. And in that time of breathing in and breathing out, having listened deeply, he was absorbing what I said and considering it and formulating his response and what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. We have to remember that even if something's the truth, it's not necessarily the right time to say it. If a friend comes to you in grief and tears to tell you that her dog died, and you say, you can get another dog. While that's true, it's not the thing to say at this time because we can see, we know that the friend is sharing her grief and her sadness. And that's the way to respond. And if I'm sad or angry or envious, I may not be able to speak or inspire confidence. And it's really difficult to fake. So to keep right speech, we also have to look deeply into our own selves, our own anger or despair, which will make us available to the other person. And when we say right speech, it's not that right means bad or wrong. It just means right speech is that which leads to the happiness of others and eases their suffering. We know sometimes we can destroy happiness in others just because we're not mindful about the way we say things. And anything we say should be for the good of another. It's kind of as if we had two choices. We could either say nothing, or we could just go ahead and say what we want and suffer the consequences. But what are the consequences? Should we be concerned for our safety? Or should we be concerned to have expressed our own views and opinions that we think so much of? People have been beaten and murdered because of their views, but other people have reached levels of high esteem because of theirs. So to what degree should we be concerned? A lot of what we do every day is automatic. We absentmindedly walk down the street or sit in a doctor's office. We wait in traffic. And we're usually on autopilot. Can you relate? We're usually on autopilot and we just react before we stop and think. But we have to train our minds to stop and think, and we can. A good friend told me a long time ago, Chris, check in with yourself, for several different reasons. But over time, I would remember that, and I would sort of do a survey of my state of mind or look a little deeper into what I was feeling and ask myself, we can ask ourselves, do I gossip too much? Do I just talk to hear my own voice? Am I trying to impress someone? And so often that's the root of where we're coming from, is that ego problem again. Ego will get you into a lot of trouble. It gets us all into a lot of trouble. So it helps to take a breath, to pause, because on automatic pilot, when we don't stop and think about what we want to say, responding to someone, or we haven't listened, we just say the first thing that comes to our mouth. But if you take a pause and you do a little self-inventory, well, I think it's kind of similar to the way the bell masters are trained, that, the bell masters have to prepare themselves to invite the bell. They don't just sit down and hit the bell. They come and sit with the bell and breathe. They breathe in and they breathe out. And they're preparing themselves. They're coming back to their one true home. Coming back to themselves. The in-breath and the out-breath calm them down. And once fully present, then the bell master can invite the bell. In the breathing in and the breathing out, the bell master has an opportunity to center and open. What if we took a breath in and a breath out before answering the phone? We would be ever so much more prepared to speak. And when we want to make a phone call, suppose we took a few breaths before we made the call. We prepare mindfully first. We can vow that what we're going to say is going to be compassionate. Because what others say is the stimulus for our feelings, but it's not the cause. And if we bring gaps to our conversation, it helps open the space. Because sometimes conversations have their own momentum, don't they? And that's what was so disarming about talking to Stephen, is this is not the rhythm people usually talk in. Now I appreciate it so much, and he's always been a light to everyone who has known him. We all grew up in a culture that used language to damn people and label them and judge them, rather than meet them with equanimity, hold back all that stuff. Words we use can help ease pain or create more of it. It can help us stand our lives or make it more confusing. It can help save a relationship or doom it. We all have those words we want to take back. But once we speak them, and especially if we write them, you can't take it back. We even weaponize speech. It's usually done when we're holding ourselves above someone again, feeling superior. And we believe that the person we're directing it to deserves it. We've seen this abundantly in politics lately. Thich Nhat Hanh says that deep listening is the foundation for right speech. And if we cannot listen mindfully, we can never have right speech. The author, Simone Weil, wrote that attention is the rarest form of generosity. I mean, think about that. We feel that generosity when someone is paying attention to us. And when we experience someone offering us the same generosity, it's quite a lift. We see the beauty in it. We're comforted by it. So then right speech is not just the words that we say, it's leaning in with our whole selves. It means paying attention to facial expressions and sounds and listening with more than just our ears. And as we practice mindfulness more and more, we're going to find it easier and easier. The beauty and the joy of practice. These days, our culture is saturated with wrong speech. But thanks to the technology today, someone can say something and it's flung around the world in just moments in ways that were unimaginable in the Buddhist time. And we tend to think that violent, harmful speech is less potent, is less wrong than violent action. Why do you suppose that is? The same could be said for peaceful thoughts and speech and actions. Abusive speech can be aggressive, but it can also be passive aggressive and more subtly cruel. The tricky thing is that when we lapse into abusive speech, it's a slippery slope because it sets our mind up to slide into other forms of abusive action. When we say things, our thoughts are no longer our private possessions, and we don't have an editor. But we can learn to employ an editor by training our own minds. And we have to ask ourselves frequently, why am I speaking? We're warned against idle chatter. And the Pali word for chatter is sampapalapa. I get a kick out of that. Doesn't it just sound like, well, the literal translation of sampapalapa is blah, blah, blah. So ask ourselves, why are we speaking? It doesn't mean that we can't ever say anything unless it's really important. The instruction is just to consider whether something will be helpful and applies to more things we want to say in the hopes of getting others to change our minds or their behavior in some way. It's really an inference to say, you should be more like me. And that's arrogance. We've all been there. So it's wrong speech to want to build ourselves up, have a sense of being right or noble or more moral. It does seem to be human nature to try to get as many people on our side as possible. More people to admire us and legitimate our behaviors. At other times, we sincerely want to help people, or we feel the need to point out something to them. But speaking primarily to show someone else the error of their ways is not beneficial, and it's not right speech. Our speech can become critical. Even if you think, somebody would be better off for listening to us, is it going to be helpful to speak up at this time? There's so much to possibly take into consideration before we speak. I may never open my mouth again, having studied this. We're likely to make someone angry or defensive, or perhaps less likely to take in anything we have to say. We could reinforce somebody's idea of their own inadequacy. We can't know if someone's ready to hear what we have to say. But if communication is cut off, everybody suffers. And when no one listens to us, we become like a bomb ready to explode. So restoring communication is urgent. So the truth has to be conveyed in a way that others can accept. Before we speak, we kind of have to understand who we're speaking to. That's not always possible. Ask ourselves, what's our motivation for saying what we want to say? If we want to feel superior to them, then we're not really about their best interest. In fact, do we really have any curiosity about them at all? When someone is cruel to us or inconsiderate, our red flags, they just go up. But as in other teachings in Buddhism, if you meet someone with equanimity, if you're looking deeply, it can offer some understanding into why they may be acting the way they're acting. Particularly if you know someone fairly well. If someone is unreasonable or rigid or selfish, and you know anything about their background, looking deeply, you can go, yeah, that's understandable. That kind of equanimity. So we're taught not to do harm to ourselves or to others. And as our meditation and mindfulness practice deepens, we won't be so caught up with words. The more anti-racism resources we read, the more we realize that right speech is not just abstaining from false speech, slanderous speech, idle speech. It's more than loving speech and compassionate listening. It's also speaking up for what's right. It's speaking up for justice and love. And it's speaking up against injustice and violence, because silence can be harmful. And although there's often a benefit to taking gaps and being silent, sometimes it can cause us to be complicit. And Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about things that matter." It's interesting to share divergent opinions from time to time, but we're very prickly if someone tells us that our speech is not appropriate. A lot of people feel like they can say whatever they want and walk away and say, "I don't care." A governor may say to a population, "Don't wear a mask. Don't be like sheep." But is it ethical? Our government allows us to lie and scream and exaggerate. It's actually protected by the First Amendment, but is it ethical? So we have to censor ourselves. It's a kind of self-discipline. Should we decide not to say something that sounds exaggerated and hurtful when we know it won't help the discussion? Remember, the Buddha said that right speech, well, remember that most practitioners say right speech is the most difficult for them. But the Buddha said the reason right speech came so easily to him is because he loved and cared about others. And that decision comes from caring about the effect of our speech on other people. And what should trump all of our interest is, instead of our interest in blowing off steam, should be the interest in helping others. But kind doesn't always mean nice. There's a distinction. Kind can be like fiery and firm, and nice is everybody act nice. But sometimes that suppresses the truth, doesn't it? So are we looking to be kind or nice? Even if we know something is true, like I talked about before, it doesn't mean it needs to be said. When we use tools of right speech, we end up getting more of what we want out of our conversations. And for a little practice, you might do this. Each time you get ready to speak, observe yourself without judgment to examine what you want to say and how you want to say it and whether it's necessary and whether this is the right time. And when you speak, check in with yourself to see if you've spoken unskillfully. So one of the possible questions for Dharma discussion is, why is it so that it's so difficult to speak the truth? Thank you very much.